So we have wonderful presentations, and I think it's one of the most important topics in our research because it is not only about well-being. As I saw all the presentations today, I noticed that the pivotal or central focus is also the meaning, the sense of the life, which gives us certain emotions during our living in the time. So probably we all might discuss about that. And now I would just I would just say, we can go one presentation after another. I suppose all of you saw the presentations in advance because now we don't have the time to do this. So we just we are supposed to to ask questions with only one exception. Frank was so nice to put some things together to present us his results because his co-author was not able to upload the presentation. So it was a very quick and flexible way to let us know about his research. But I would go one presentation after another, okay? Frank, and you would be the last one, okay? Yes? Okay, so, the first presentation was by Alexander Unger, Oliveira Figueiro, and Pastamelo. Do time perspectives and mindfulness lead to life satisfaction and cross-cultural study? And you might ask the questions, or maybe you would like to say something from your study. What was especially important for you? What would you like to focus on or to highlight?
Yes, maybe welcome to all. First, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Good. So our study was about the influence of time perspectives on life satisfaction across 4 countries. And we have mindfulness included as a mediator. And maybe I like to highlight some surprising results. For example, we had 4 countries, the United States, Poland, Spain, and Japan. And in the last one in Japan, we find a reversed influence of mindfulness, which means very surprisingly that those participants who score high at mindfulness score low at life satisfaction. Though there is a need for some explanation. Maybe we can discuss this shortly if someone would like to know. This is one surprising result. In Spain and Poland, we found the expected mediator effects. In the United States, not all of the effects were significant. So there is also a need for explanation. Yeah. So maybe just as a short introduction.
I found it very surprising too, and it was my question I noted here, which
okay.
I wanted to ask.
So maybe I can give an ad hoc.
Maybe you have a hypothesis. Why is it
some speculations. So it could be that people in Japan who are suffering from low life satisfaction, that they will get involved into more mindfulness practice to cope with it. So this could be a possibility, but there is a need for future studies to have a look. What is mindfulness in Japan? Are there any differences in the understanding? Maybe we have to check the measurement instruments. So I think this will be one important next step to get some information if there is some differences. But for the moment, this would be my response, that it might be that people who are suffering in some ways, they use mindfulness practice to cope with it in Japan, which could explain the negative association between mindfulness and life satisfaction in our sample.
We have one question from Antanas and then the other one from Marco Fabri.
I'm not sure if there is a question or just a comment, but when I saw these results from Japan, my thought was that may be related with the mindfulness and Zen Buddhism, because actually mindfulness is derivative from Zen Buddhism, in my opinion. So probably in the original Zen Buddhism, there are some additional practices that works in different way than secular mindfulness. So it's just a thought.
Yeah, I think it goes into exactly this direction, where we can find maybe the reasons for these surprising observations. There is another question in the chat. I saw that
Marco Fabri. Should I read it, or would you like to read it yourself?
I can do. I would like to know, why did not you predict a predictive effect of future on life satisfaction, or hypothesis, but only past positive and past negative? Okay, this is true. This could be a limitation. Mainly, we focus on the negative, on the deviation from a negative time perspective as an overall configuration of all five time perspectives. I will check what we have found for the future. Of course, it makes sense to assume that there is also a significant effect, but I have to check it for the 4 countries. So I will put it into the chat, or send it as email also.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Marco says, thanks. Okay. Any other questions? Statements? Comments? Nothing. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Alexander, and Julie too.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from your team? No. Olivera Figuera, no, not there. Okay, so we can go forward with our next presentation about the students from Lima, Peru. And I've seen there several authors already who are already there. Dora is there. Yes.
Yes.
And yes, Benjamin. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. Yes. Well, fascinating research. And would you like to highlight some results or to share insights with us? Hello?
Here.
Yes.
Yes. Well, we conducted a research in Lima. It was a future orientation with another theoretical model that has 7 subdimensions. No, and well, we got, I think, quite a lot of results, and but I would highlight about them that the expectance dimension of the future orientation was
you didn't find many
very important.
I
hear something.
And
Thanks.
I hear everything twice.
Okay, yeah, I think it's okay now.
Okay.
So, well, we found that optimism or expectance was a very important variable to predict future orientation in 2 life domains, career and family domain, in youngsters, people between 18 and 30 years old. We also find that the 2 models we ran were, explained in a highly matter the variance of the other 3 dependent variables, which were well-being, called flourishing in our conceptualization, also life purpose. But we didn't find, contrary to what the theory mentioned, that future orientation didn't explain the variance of academic achievement, which is something that caught our attention. And we also wanted to bring it on board to see maybe if you have some comments or opinion regarding that. No, what could be happening? Maybe, I don't know, it's something about the specific sample or anything related. I don't know if Dora, Benjamin want to add something more.
Well, I just want to remark that our model is different because we're working with a multidimensional model in which 3 components are acting as the whole variable. And I think that's interesting, as Hasuli already remarked, that the optimism, which is the subcategory of expectation, is the stronger predictor of the outcome variables except the academic achievement. So that's remarkable, and that's why we decide to share this information with you all.
One thing I would also highlight that I think is pretty interesting is that the results for the career domain as compared to the family domain, the career domain was much more predictive of both flourishing, life purpose, and academic achievement. If we look at the R-squares for a career domain, they're much higher than the family domain. So I think that's really interesting, and it might be speaking to the importance that people give careers and the maybe diminishing source of meaning that people are getting from family. So I thought that was interesting, and I don't know if worrying would be a way to describe it, but I think that was an interesting sort of unexpected finding in terms of the relative effect sizes of the career domain versus the family domain.
Hasuli, you shared a picture.
Yeah, I was just
sending.
Yeah, so maybe you can picture how is the distribution.
Okay, I can't open it. I'm sorry, but maybe maybe somebody from the team. Yes, it's a very interesting model. Did you consider to work further with your sample, maybe to make a longitudinal research from that? Because young people develop themselves and develop their well-being concepts, life concepts. So maybe it would be interesting to look on it also in time perspective. There is one question by Antanas. Is this effect of career maybe related to the age of respondents? Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Not only the age, but also the context, right? Like these questionnaires and the whole research was like, in a sense, like situated inside of the university. So participants may have been primed to think more in terms of their careers and their professional development, much more so than their family development, and more so given that they're still young students.
Yeah, related to that, we were speaking with Dora the other day that it might be also because of it was a sample in the city. I mean, in Lima, it's very different, the context of urban and every other, I mean, and all the other variables related to it, no? And maybe people in rural areas are in another setting, no? Regarding everything. I don't know, maybe Dora, you want to be a bit broad on that, but yes.
Interesting. There is one more thing by Alexander Unger, response to the question of, okay, it's not from this presentation, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I interrupted you. Okay, are there any other questions concerning this presentation? No. Okay, so thank you very much to you three. And probably we have another opportunities during these days to discuss it further. Yeah. Okay, we go forward to our third presentation. Do I read it right? Serenamente, a mindfulness-based time perspective program for Chilean adolescents. Do we have the author there? Yeah. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the name.
I think Christian, no?
Christian. Lenning, do you know him?
Yes, I do.
You wanted to Lenning. Okay, that's you.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So you're going to present it because no? You could.
Which presentation? You want me to introduce it or to present the project?
No. We all saw the presentation. I do not see the Christian here, but I see you as a second author. So I thought the one who is there should be open for questions.
I do. Yeah. I was delegated the role of answering those questions. Yes, I confirm that. Yes.
Great. So the round is open.
Lenning, do you want to say like a sentence or two about the study, just to introduce it?
Yes. So about the Mind Serenamente. So it is a program that combines principles of time perspective therapy with mindfulness. And it's specifically tailored for adolescents. It has many different steps from what I have seen. It has already been implemented in Chile. That I just gave you like the glimpse overview. Manuscript was written for it, which I revised some time ago. But at the same time, it's hard for me to describe if I'm not being asked more direct questions. Since I didn't implement it, just to clarify. Yeah, that's why I can't. It's kind of like the analog of it's a project that because I wasn't hands-on from the beginning. That's why I cannot like give an excessive amount of details.
Thanks.
I found it very impressive how much add-on the positive results it brought to the patients. But however, I didn't quite understand if the patients leave in the clinic, if they have only this therapy or also other therapies. It wasn't quite clear for me to just to understand what is on work there. Only this therapy or maybe something else too?
I think if I recall, I'm going to double check, but I think it was focused on that therapy, but I cannot, it's possible that before or after they took other therapies. I can double check on that.
And Christian, is there medical therapist there or doctor? Or?
He's a psychologist. He's is a clinical psychologist to the best of my knowledge at Concepcion University in Chile, and there he divides his duties between research, teaching, and clinical. To the best of my knowledge, yeah.
It is a very interesting research.
For sure. Could not agree more.
Questions? In chat? Okay. So we have to wish success to this wonderful program, and many lives it can rescue from the suicide. Okay. We have one or two questions. No. Marco, would you kindly send your private messages to Alexander, please, only to Alexander and not to the general chat? It would be nice. Okay? Yes? Okay. This is for this presentation. Okay, I'm sorry. Then I'll read it. Or Lenin, would you like to read it yourself? Can I ask which mindfulness approach you combine with time perspective therapy?
I have actually the brochure for it, for the, not the brochure, the whole manual, the treatment manual. If you give me a second. I think I can answer that very quickly.
Lenin, I would like to propose that, you have it.
I believe it was mindfulness-based stress reduction, if my memory is correct, but I cannot confirm completely.
Okay, you can show it afterwards. We will go give the word to Olga Klamot and to the embodied balanced time perspective. And if you'll find the brochure in the meantime, you can show it afterwards.
I actually have Christian directly talking to me, so I'll ask these questions directly to him.
Okay. Okay. Then, yes. Okay. Oh, we'll go forward, and you'll get your word after afterwards. Okay.
Yes.
Olga, are you there? No? Okay. Then, well, I don't know if it has any sense to ask questions without the author. I suppose not. So maybe we have an opportunity to see her in a social event and ask our questions to her. I would go forward to the presentation Time Thieves, Enhancers and Reflections, examining experiences of leisure time and technology use through reflective time tracking. Anna?
Yeah, hi, thank you.
The stage is yours. Or would you like to say a couple of words about your research?
Yeah, absolutely. So with this study, I was interested in looking at, first of all, how people are experiencing and defining what their leisure time is, and thinking about the ways in which they're using technology in their leisure time. And then I was also interested in looking at how a reflective time journaling exercise where they're tracking what they're doing in their leisure time can provide insights or experiences for the individuals who are tracking their time. So my participants went through a first interview where we just discussed what their experiences of leisure time are, how they define their leisure time. And then I had them go through a 7-day time journaling experience where they were tracking what they did with their leisure time, categorizing what the main activity was each time they experienced leisure, and then anything else that was happening simultaneously with that main activity. And then within that time journal, they were also tracking any thoughts or feelings or reflections that were coming up for them in the tracking experience. And then I brought them back for another interview where we then kind of explored what that time tracking experience was like for them. And I used inductive thematic analysis to explore these interviews and these experiences, and found general patterns and themes looking at awareness that was brought to their time, the ways in which participants talked about context and situations and how that influenced what they counted as leisure and the ways that they used their leisure. Also looking at how technology influenced the quality of their leisure experiences and the ways in which they made meaning from their leisure experiences. So that's kind of all of the gist of it in a nutshell. And I'm happy to chat about it further with any questions.
It was a fascinating research, and I was asking myself if I would I would find the time of to participate in such research, because it is much of leisure time which goes into the tracking.
Absolutely, that was something that came up with the participants in their reflections. Of some of them at the end were very much ready to be done with tracking their time by the end of the 7 days, and others who were a bit more open to some of them saying, oh yeah, I could see where this would be useful. I wouldn't necessarily want to every day, all day track my time, but I could see how it would be useful if I was in a time of transition in my life and really wanted to understand where my time was going, or if I wanted to be in a place of making a change in my behaviors, I would use this to kind of help me understand what was going on. But yeah, I definitely agree the amount of time that can go into tracking your time and the metacognition that comes into that can be quite time consuming.
Mm-hmm. That is great. Okay, the floor is open. So if you have any questions you would like to ask here.
I have a question, so maybe I could ask.
Nope. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Yes. I do not remember, but probably it wasn't in the presentation, or it was. Do the research was conducted during the COVID pandemic?
So that's a great question. It was conducted, let's see, spring of 2020. Well, fall of 2019 into spring of 2020, and I was actually in the process of working with more participants. So I ended up having 8 who completely finished the 3 stages. And then I had a number of participants who were either had just done the initial interview with me and then were tracking their time when the pandemic hit, or they had finished tracking their time and we were going to do the final interview. And I decided that because the pandemic was such a large situational change, that for this particular study, it would make sense to look individually at the people who had participated prior to the pandemic, instead of also then including that transitional stage.
Okay, because I looked at the results and this thought about the role of technologies during the pandemics. It was much more prominent in our life than before. So it was just interesting what time it was conducted. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm actually currently conducting a study that's looking at our experiences of time during the pandemic, which I think it's definitely interesting to look at some of those results compared to the results of this study, and looking at how leisure is talked about or experienced during the pandemic compared to how it was discussed before.
There is one question in the chat. No, it was from the previous presentation. Okay. Do you have any preliminary research results from your research now? If the mindfulness of our time use was enhanced through pandemic, or if the time perspective became different, or if there is a shift from one side to another.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much out of it quite yet because I haven't done the analysis, but I think definitely through the conversations that I've been having and through the survey results that we've been collecting, I would say a lot of people are speaking about the ways in which they're thinking about their time differently, and even just recognizing certain things that were habits, certain relationships that they were in, that with the pandemic, they're now realizing, oh, maybe I don't have to continue that if it isn't serving me in the way that I want it to. And so recognizing different shifts that can happen that previously we didn't necessarily think were possible because we were just in the habitual process of repeating our time use. So I'll be really curious to see how, once we do the analysis, what other patterns are available there.
That is great. Thank you. Okay, further questions? No? Okay. So we can go forward and give the word to Frank. Okay, Lenning is sending the chat.
Yeah, it's just that
responses.
I just tried to, I consulted directly with Dr. Cristiano Yanadel, and I've been translating from Spanish to English in the chat to answer the question that Frank Worrell asked, and the other question in the chat that was issued. So I just wanted to get that for, yeah, wanted to provide proper answers. Yes.
Yes, the information. Okay. So if there are no questions and no further comments to the previous presentations, we can give the word to Frank.
Yeah, in terms of fairness, I'm actually not going to share the screen. I'm just going to summarize the study.
Okay, but you can share the screen because
didn't get to. So
okay,
yeah, no. So I will summarize the study. Basically, one of the areas that I do research in is with gifted and talented adolescents, and one of the things that we know from and particularly those who are academically talented, although I do study talent in other domains, although we know. Well, the literature has told us that students who are academically talented typically are doing well. So they are typically reporting generally average to high levels of well-being. And so the studies with Dante Dixon, who's a former student of mine, who is actually very interested in hope, and he uses Snyder's hope model, which has two components: agency. I know how to do what I need to do. Pathways. I can think of alternate routes to get to my destination, to get to a positive outcome. And so what we actually did in this study is we had a sample of 446 adolescents attending a summer program for the academically gifted. And we looked at outcomes that were, they're sort of well-being, but they're well-being in the academic sense. So things like behavioral engagement, emotional engagement, work ethic, self-efficacy, curiosity, constructive competitiveness, as opposed to destructive competitiveness, so sense of belonging and so forth. And what we found is that when we controlling for demographics and perceived ability, that hope in fact explained a meaningful amount of variance in all of those different outcomes. What we then did is we looked at the agency and pathways, because the hope score is made up of both, to see if in fact there are differential contributions. And we found, interestingly, for instance, that agency predicted work ethic more, behavioral engagement, academic self-concept. Pathways predicted curiosity, constructive competition. So both aspects of hope are making contributions, but depending on the variable. And finally, we actually did a cluster analysis. And in past clusters, we found a low hope cluster, an average hope cluster, a high hope cluster. Sometimes we've found 4, but in most studies, 3. In this particular study, we did not find a low hope cluster. There were 10 students, and potentially, again, these are all academically talented students. So we found an average cluster, an above average cluster, and a high hope cluster. But even within this select sample, there were substantial differences with the high hope cluster reporting higher outcomes or more adaptive outcomes than the above average cluster, and they reported more adaptive outcomes than the average hope cluster. So that's the study in a nutshell.
That's great. Thank you, Frank. In a couple of words, everything is said. Okay, I didn't quite get the meaning of the time perspective in this study.
Well, you know, so one of the things I have argued in my work, not everybody agrees. I'll address it a bit in my talk tomorrow, is that I think we have equated time perspective with the ZTPI in some sense, but time perspective is a much broader construct, and there are multiple time constructs, hope being one of them. So, I mean, the previous symposium on consciousness, there are many, many different aspects. And so hope is actually clearly a future-oriented time construct, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. So I do think that work on hope and some of these other constructs that people study, temporal depth and so forth, fall clearly within the time perspective framework.
Okay. So hope is our future orientation and much more than that.
Yeah, so it's akin to, it's one of the future-oriented constructs. In fact, I think most of the largest number of our time constructs focus on the future, right? Optimism, and I'm going to list a number of them tomorrow, but yeah, so there are a lot of future-oriented constructs, including future orientation.
Great, thank you. There is one question by Anna Young. What would you suggest as future implications for this study?
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of work being paid in the academic space to some constructs, for instance, grit, growth mindset, and so forth. And there are a lot of dollars being spent to develop those psychosocial variables in students with and I think my student would argue, and I would argue, that in fact hope perhaps is a better thing to do. So in fact, one of the studies he's working on right now is, can you change somebody's hope? Can you increase students' hope? And if you do increase their hope, do you see increased well-being and increased academic performance? So that study is ongoing, but I think that's really the thing. If you think about the study that Lenning and his co-author were talking about with using time therapy, which I am skeptical of, as Lenning knows, but that if we are actually going to be, can we use these time constructs that we think are so important to actually, can we change them in people's lives and then lead to better outcomes? I mean, I think ultimately that's where we want to go with a lot of the stuff that we are doing.
Thank you. Okay. Fantastic, thank you. Okay.
Thanks.
Further questions? No. Okay. So, well, it's my first session I have to moderate in this in this model. So please help me. Antanas, do you have an experience already? I've heard several wonderful, fantastic presentations or research, and I wanted to thank you all for this brief review of your work, and also for the critical view and questions. I hope we have an opportunity to exchange about it in the next days, or hear more during the keyword session.
And starting from tomorrow, we can meet in Small Talk Cafe and chat and talk about almost everything. So we can continue discussions there.
You mean now or anytime?
No. Tomorrow, starting from tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. So see you tomorrow in the cafe. Thank you very much, and have a good day, evening, night.